Hi, my name is Dave Whitty. I'm one of your elders here at Fremont. Today, I get to talk to you about Luke 22. There's a lot in this chapter, including a description of the Lord's Supper, which starts in verse 13 with the disciples finding things just as Jesus had told them. Such a powerful reminder that God keeps his promises. Also, Jesus tells us in verse 26 that the greatest among you should be like the youngest. I see this as a reminder not to seek power and glory in this life, but to follow God with the joy and innocence of children. Then in verse 27, Jesus tells us, I am among you as one who serves, reminding us to have a heart of service just like Jesus did. This chapter also tells us about the arrest of Jesus, Peter disowning Jesus, and Jesus being mocked by his guards and Pontius Pilate. That is a lot for one chapter. What has really stood out to me in this chapter, however, is the importance of prayer. In verse 32, Jesus says, I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith will not fail. He is, of course, talking to Simon, later called Peter. I've always felt such an affinity for Peter. He got to live with, walk with, and know Christ personally, and yet he still fails. Peter's story gives me so much hope when I fail. If Peter can fail after all that he knew firsthand about Jesus, I guess I can forgive myself when I fail too. Peter often relies on himself and his own strength while with Jesus. In verse 33, Peter replies to Jesus, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Peter was very strong-willed. He thought he could do it himself. He meant it when he said he would go to prison or even suffer death for Jesus. But willpower is not enough. Just a little later that night, Peter denies he ever knew Jesus. But somehow, with strong faith and Jesus' prayers, Peter goes on to be the rock upon which Jesus builds his church. In verse 40, Jesus tells the disciples, pray that you will not fall into temptation. In verse 44, it says, Jesus, being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly. Jesus literally prays so hard that his sweat is like blood. In verse 46, after finding the disciples asleep, Jesus says, get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. Willpower, love for Jesus, spending time with the real-life God in the flesh were not enough for the disciples. They needed prayer. Even Jesus needed prayer. So do we. Tim Keller, in the Songs of Jesus, put this need for prayer, for strength from beyond ourselves, very well. In one of the prayers, he says, help me to say to my unruly inner being, put your hope in God. Willpower is not enough. We need God power to get through this life. I pray for all of you that you will search for this power in Scripture and ask for it every day in prayer. Thank you for joining me. Talk to you soon.